Welcome to a special edition of Cooperative Vermont. I'm here with Erik Andrus, who is working on the Vermont Sail Freight Project, building a sail-powered barge that will be going down to New York and back, bringing local foods to market, essentially. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the origins of this project are?
Sure. Well, kind of one of the things that I'm interested in as a farmer is adapting traditional approaches to agriculture and culture in general, and trying to adapt them for present-day needs. So to that end, we are really focused on introducing or featuring grain as a major crop of our farm. Grain used to be a mainstay of Champlain Valley farm economies, and nowadays small grains for human consumption are very rarely, or they're not produced in much of any quantity. The barge aspect is comes out of a long-term interest in sailboats and a working sailing craft in particular. I love to build things, and I'm really interested in thermodynamic efficiencies in addition to economic efficiencies. So my hope is, with the Sail Freight Project, to launch a concept that will be both thermodynamically efficient, that is efficient in terms of the amount of energy it takes to accomplish work, but will also prove to be economically viable.
Because one thing that really kind of caught my interest about this is if, even you go down to the waterfront in Burlington and you see all this kind of like leftover evidence of what was a fairly kind of vibrant and active freight economy on Lake Champlain that's been pretty much entirely supplanted by trucking.
Yeah.
So do you see this as kind of like a demonstration and something that you see as perhaps sail freight, or just in general waterbound freight, becoming a larger thing in the future, or is this what is the kind of bigger picture that you see around the role of Lake Champlain in our region's economy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The interesting thing is that water really defined European settlement in this country. And the overwhelming majority of the population centers in Vermont and New England and the Northeast in general fall on navigable waterways. And it's also nearly universal that these navigable waterways have fallen into disuse, and all of the infrastructure and the cultural know-how and the physical craft themselves that did this work in the early industrial economy, they're all but disappeared from our knowledge. So it's my belief that as energy costs increase in the future, that we're going to need to reconsider water, that water transport ultimately will be, as it once was, people's first choice for moving heavy loads around the region. Because you can do it with so little energy. With the right kind of boat and with a lot of patience, it takes very little energy. It may take a lot of time, but it takes very little energy.
So then, right now this is starting up as a nonprofit project in which you are you're doing a Kickstarter to raise some of the funds, and you've also got a partnership with a foundation. And what's the time frame for kind of getting this going?
It's actually a really accelerated time frame. We formed the partnership in October of 2012 between myself and the Willowell Foundation of Moncton, Vermont. And we are building the craft right now on my farm. It will be launched in Lake Champlain by very early in July. And we'll do shakedown voyages and demonstration shipping within home waters within Lake Champlain. And then we're actually going to conduct the commercial mission for the first time, sailing with 12 or so tons of Vermont-produced agricultural products from Lake Champlain to New York City in September 2013.
And so you'll be going down Lake Champlain through the canal, and then down the Hudson River.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then what's the sort of plan of logistics for the return voyage back to Vermont?
Yeah. Well, we don't intend to travel empty. We recently made contact with Matt Birong, who's the owner of Three Squares Cafe in Vergennes. And so at the very least, we're going to be transporting 2 tons of cocoa beans for a chocolate making venture that he's involved in. So we can buy just about any cargo from any place in the world in the Port of New York. So hopefully the role of this project will be to transport goods that are needed from the seacoast back to the Champlain Valley, and so to perform services and take trucks off the road in both directions.
Nice. So the so kind of once this sort of test trial voyage is completed, one of the things on the Kickstarter that really caught my interest was the idea that ultimately seeing this project transitioning into a farmer-owned marketing cooperative.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what the vision is for that?
Yeah, well, to date we have 12 farms participating, and some of those farms are really interested in the potential of this project to get them a visible presence, real foothold in the New York City urban marketplace, which is a superior marketplace, but it's also highly competitive and difficult for new growers to stand out. With a big and beautiful sailboat, we hope to really unify the Vermont growers' presence, and it also tells the story of not only who we are, but why we're there, and what we bring to the marketplace that other growers already vending there might not be able to offer so well. The focus of our crops, the focus of our products is in non-perishables, and that is grains, potatoes, maple syrup, orchard products. These things tend to require a lot of space to grow, and for that reason they're not well represented in New York City open-air markets, because they, space within a close radius of the city center is too high rent to grow these things effectively. So it's right and proper that these goods should be sourced from far away, and by transporting them by sail, we're actually adding to the story and the value of these goods.
And so would the idea be kind of, if you kind of get this initial voyage going, to have a regular thing, and maybe even if it's successful, add more ships to the fleet?
Oh, that's totally the goal. Yeah, we want to have a fleet. But the first step is that if our fall 2013 voyage goes as planned and is a success, we will promptly reevaluate what went right and what we can improve upon. But if things are even halfway positive from the outcome of that voyage, we're going to place our first barge in continuous service in 2014. So there are appropriate shelf-stable Vermont products that we can transport probably at least 6 or 7 months out of the year on these waterways, starting with maple syrup and ending with pumpkins, or possibly even ending with Christmas trees. The barge that we're building now can hold 600 bundled Christmas trees. So long as we can find a way to get the barge home again, or overwinter it below the locks, because the canals close in late November, we hope to make it a steady operation. So that's the first step. Ultimately, I think that our ability to pay our growers really strong wholesale prices will make this an attractive marketing outlet for them. And although at this point I'm being very proactive in aggressively building our team and trying to recruit growers that will add to the cargo, I think that ultimately this will be something that will pay them such good prices that they'll want to help me form a cooperative structure.
So then, and for this initial voyage, you've got a volunteer crew. What would you see as the kind of the staffing for this once it hopefully gets going and is a regularly running thing? Would it be something where you would have member farmers taking turns going down? Would it be something where you would have a set group of people who really have the skills to do it,
Yeah.
Going down and back? Like what's that look like so far?
There are different ways that it could develop. Right now, by necessity, we're developing this whole project with a low overhead and a low regulatory threshold.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the boat is built to such a size that it's exempt from commercial vessel inspections because it's below the regulated length and tonnage from the perspective of the Coast Guard. So a volunteer crew can sail it, understanding that they place themselves at risk. Basically, the Coast Guard said that we could carry, that we could be rated up to 15 gross tons, and their main advice to us was just make sure you wear life jackets when you're on deck. But in the long term, if we want to really develop professional operators, we will need to have fully inspected craft. But those are objectives we can really only pursue once we have an established revenue stream. Mm-hmm. Right now, everything about the concept is so untested that, in my view, though, that level of investment isn't worth making until we have some feedback from operations.
And so, if you're starting with this this craft that's below that regulatory threshold, and if you go forward, what would be the sort of if you were going to build something bigger, mm-hmm. kind of for the steady stream, 7-month years,
yeah.
kind of stream back and forth? What would be the sort of the size that would be kind of the ideal size then?
Yeah, there are two really good models from history that have been very informative for the project. And one is the historic canal barges on Lake Champlain, like the Lois McClure. The Lois is, I think, 80 feet long and can carry at least 50 or 60 tons of cargo. Once the vessels get that big, then it becomes a little bit of a challenge to fill them every single time that they can sail. It may be that a smaller vessel, maybe even along the lines of the ones we're building now, which is under 40 feet, it may be that smaller vessels may be more versatile in being able to deploy many places at a given time. It might be more worthwhile for the member farmers to have a presence in many different markets simultaneously than to have one large ship that is only able to pass through half as often. But that's something that feedback from our operations will tell us. Ultimately, we could build these boats up to the size of the Lois McClure, not necessarily using historical techniques throughout, but using a sort of composite design that's lower cost, similar to the design of Ceres that we're building now, but bigger and beefier.
That actually brings up an interesting point I was hoping to touch on, but kind of in many ways this is sort of looking back at the history of the lake for inspiration, the economy of the lake. But I think it's also kind of in many ways, when things being powered by wind isn't just something anachronistic anymore. It's something we're talking about a lot, and so there's a lot of kind of new technology that is also sort of coming in. And so how does that fit together? What are the sort of the things that really harken back to how things would have been done for hundreds of years, and what are the pieces of this that really are, you think, innovative or kind of sort of bringing in the technologies of our time?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. The transport mechanism itself is very closely derived from traditional forms. We're building a flat bottom boat that is primarily powered by sail. And if we're not powering it by sail, we intend, to the utmost extent that we can, to power it by human muscle power. For instance, with poles or with a yulo, which is a Chinese sculling oar that's appropriate for vessels even up to 15 gross tons. Or perhaps a solar charged electric motor or something along those lines. We don't, it would be possible to conduct this trading route with no sail at all. You could just build a flat bottom boat and you could put an outboard on it and you could motor the whole way. But I feel that this really undermines the value and the contribution of what we're doing. So although we will have an outboard in case we really need it, a good and reliable one that's capable of moving the boat out of the way or whatever it needs to do, we intend to make a show of using it and documenting the fact that we can do this primarily with human muscle and wit and sail power. Mm-hmm. The thing about wind power that strikes me in the present dialogue, wind power is never harnessed in the ways in which it's actually most effective for performing work. The way, when you talk about wind power in the contemporary economy, we're always talking about charging batteries or moving turbines and storing it in the form of electricity. If you, instead of turning a propeller on a windmill and using that to generate electricity and then using the electricity for work, if you harness the wind directly for work, you actually get much greater efficiencies. But those are never considered. For instance, that because it's implicitly assumed that that's a move backwards. Okay, so we would rather, for instance, charge, use the wind to charge batteries, and then use the batteries to propel an outboard or something like that, then we would just put a sail up, in which you get more power out of the wind. You do give up something in the way of convenience, and it is more demanding in terms of skill and timing and all those things, but we see those as fun challenges.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I just kind of wonder about is in terms of like automation of certain things. Is that kind of on the agenda at all? Sort of having certain things be computer powered in order to, lessen the number of people needed to say run it. So
I don't think so. The second model that I forgot to mention, the Lois McClure, the Champlain Maritime Museum's reconstructed canal barge is one model, but another one is the English Thames sailing barge.
Okay.
And the Thames sailing barge was such an efficient mover of cargo. They were able to build these barges that could handle loads of up to 200 tons, and they required only 2 sailors. And usually these sailors were not the prime of the labor pool either. They were typically an old man and a boy, and the old man would work the helm and the boy would work everything else. So our boat is under 40 feet long. Thames barges came up to 80, 90, or 100 feet, but the lines are all the same. They just get bigger and longer as the boats. The method of actually sailing them is pretty much identical, so the crew requirements are low.
Okay.
I don't think it's likely that we would ever need to have a lot of computerized winches or sail trimming devices or anything like that. Mm-hmm. The role of technology in the project is primarily in the marketing end. We have friends who have started this marketing initiative called yourfarmstand.com that's been in progress for several years, and now it's serving several different towns in the Champlain Valley. And basically the way it works is farmers offer their goods online and it's listed for sale, sort of like any virtual shopping cart. And customers place their orders, and farmers then receive these lists of the goods they've agreed to provide and deliver them to a drop-off point. Customers pick them up, and the money is exchanged via PayPal. And the folks at Your Farm Stand have agreed to let us adapt the software for our project. And that way we'll be able to have an internet-based shopping presence all throughout the region. In our case, customers will be able to figure out, use Google Maps to see where our barge is at any given time and where it's going on its route. And if it's coming your way, and if there's something on the barge that you want to buy, you can buy it at any point in the voyage. You could maybe buy it before it sails, before the barge is loaded, or even while the barge is en route, there could be goods in the hold that are listed on the internet for sale. Customers could place orders and buy them while they're on the barge in the middle of the river, in the middle of the lake. And then in placing that order, they enter into a contract which expects that they will show up at some point where the barge docks. From the sailor's perspective, it doesn't necessarily matter whether, once an order is placed, it doesn't matter whether the customer picks up their stuff in Albany or Kingston or New York. Just that they pay attention to where the barge is and where it's going to stop next and come and meet it at some point in the journey. And of course, if that doesn't work out, then the sale can be voided. But we expect that the barge tracking aspect will add to sort of the liveliness and the interest of the whole thing. And hopefully we'll be able to sell the majority of the barge's cargo before we even leave Vermont.
Wow, that's a pretty, that reduces a lot of that uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, if everything's pre-sold, or at least we're hoping for at least half of the 12 tons of cargo to be allocated to orders placed in advance of sailing, then essentially what we're doing then is performing the function of a UPS truck. We're a delivery. You could think of the project as sort of like Amazon.com, except that the only goods listed for sale are Champlain Valley non-perishables. And the delivery is extremely slow, and the UPS truck doesn't come to your house. You have to go to the river and meet it. So it's sort of like that, but like Amazon.com, but a much more restricted range of goods and much less convenient, but more compelling. So we think that people will enjoy the ability to come and meet an actual physical boat that actually transported your goods. When you place an order on Amazon, the mechanisms and the people that fall between the point of production and the point of consumption are totally invisible and inscrutable. With this, it's a tangible link. You will receive, if you're at South Street Seaport or at a port in Kingston and picking up your goods, you're taking them out of the hands of someone who took them out of the farmer's hands and was moving at relatively slow speed of travel directly between those 2 points, a real water linkage, a water lifeline between production and consumption.
So it seems like, and also thinking about kind of the history of maritime travel in general, the arrival of a ship is oftentimes kind of a cause for a larger community gathering or celebration.
Of course, yeah.
So have you been reaching out kind of when planning this to sort of farmers markets in the various communities or other institutions to sort of build an event around the arrival of the vessel?
I think that's going to be no problem whatsoever. There's actually a couple of groups in New York City that are already kind of thinking about a ceremonial welcoming or something along those lines. Hey, I'm all for it, but of course we want it to succeed commercially and not to be primarily just an occasion for show. But to turn back the clock a little bit, Art Cohn, who has been director of the Champlain Maritime Museum, told me about how when the canal connecting Lake Champlain to the Hudson River first opened, there was a group of boats that came down from Vermont for the very first time after it opened. And when they arrived, they lined up all horses and carriages all along the edge of the river, and they fired off a salute from the battery and dipped the flags. This was a real big occasion because this was essentially tying the whole region together. That meant that New York and Vermont were now joined in a way that they hadn't been able to be for 150 years of settlement or more. And I think that in this age of shifting economic and energy realities, that message is every bit as relevant as it was in 1825. That water resources, in many ways, are going to be the key to community vitality in the coming century. And water transport with a food theme is going to be a key component. So we hope that, well, I guess I feel that there's no question but that the project is right. The question is whether the project is right too soon. And in the end, whether you're right too soon or you're wrong is kind of a question of semantics. But
you get to say "I told you so" in 20 years.
yeah, you know,
at the very least.
It won't be too comforting. But the transport of heavy goods by water is something that's just so innate to any kind of economy, human economy that's bound by real energy realities. If energy totally doesn't matter, if it's infinite in supply, then why not just put anything on rubber and run it down the interstate at 75 miles an hour? But I feel like in the future, we don't have those kinds of resources to waste anymore, and we need to start bringing things back to a more local scale and to a regional scale. But if you adapt constructively and successfully, then you can actually transport very heavy loads extremely long distances. And there's no guilt or carbon cost involved. We can source goods from the tropics perfectly easily through our traditional trade routes if we care enough to try.
Well, this sounds like quite the fascinating project to watch as it develops over the next year. And for anyone out there who's interested, Erik has a Kickstarter going right now. It's under, if you search for Vermont Sail Freight Project, you can find it, and it ends, I believe, April 25th. So if this kind of thing floats your boat, get on it. But thank you so much for coming in and chatting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.